The fluorescent lights of Sterling Media Group hummed softly in the empty 40th floor office. Alina Carter sat at her cramped desk in the corner, staring at the glowing screen of her phone with trembling fingers. The black and white image on the screen showed a tiny bean-shaped figure, barely 2 inches long. With a rapidly flickering heartbeat that the technician had pointed out with such enthusiasm just hours earlier, Alina felt her stomach twist into knots. At 26 years old, she had worked tirelessly to escape her small hometown in upstate New York, earning her marketing degree while working 2 jobs, and finally landing this position at one of Manhattan's most prestigious media companies. Now everything she had built seemed to be crumbling around her like a sandcastle at high tide. She needed advice desperately. Her best friend, Jennifer, was the only person who knew the whole truth about that night 3 months ago at the corporate gala. The champagne, the unexpected connection, the hotel room that was supposed to remain a secret forever. Alina pulled up her messages and found Jennifer's contact. Her vision blurred slightly from the tears threatening to spill over as she attached the ultrasound image and typed a quick message. "Jen, I need to talk. The test was positive. I'm 12 weeks along. I'm terrified." Her finger hovered over the send button for just a moment before she pressed it. The message whooshed away into the digital universe. Alina exhaled slowly, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. She was about to close her phone when her blood turned to ice. The screen showed the message thread still open, but the name at the top made her heart stop completely. Julian Blackwood, not Jennifer Morrison. Julian Blackwood. Boss. The CEO, the father. Alina's hands began to shake so violently that her phone clattered onto the desk. She stared at it in horror, as if it were a venomous snake coiled and ready to strike. This could not be happening. This was not real. She must be having some kind of stress-induced nightmare. But the phone continued to glow innocently. The message marked as delivered and read. The elevator chimed at the far end of the office floor. Alina's head snapped up, her pulse thundering in her ears. Heavy footsteps echoed across the polished marble floor, purposeful and unwavering. She knew those footsteps. Everyone in the building knew those footsteps. Julian Blackwood emerged from the corridor leading to the executive suites. At 38 years old, he was a legend in the media industry. He had built Sterling Media Group from a small publishing house into a multimedia empire worth billions. He was tall, easily 6 feet 3 inches, with dark hair that was always perfectly styled except for right now. Right now, it looked like he had been running his fingers through it repeatedly. His charcoal gray suit was impeccable as always, but his tie was loosened, and the top button of his shirt was undone. His face was unreadable, carved from granite and just as cold. But his eyes, those penetrating dark eyes that had made countless executives squirm during board meetings, were locked directly on Alina. She stood up on shaky legs, knocking her chair backwards. "It hit the cubicle wall with a dull thump," Miss Carter, Julian said, his deep voice cutting through the silence like a blade. He stopped a few feet away from her desk, holding his phone in one hand. "I believe we need to have a conversation." Alina opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her brain screamed at her to say something, anything. But her voice had completely abandoned her. Julian glanced down at his phone, then back up at her. "According to the date stamp on this ultrasound image, you are approximately 12 weeks pregnant." She managed a barely perceptible nod. "The Sterling Media Group annual gala was held exactly 12 weeks and 4 days ago," Julian continued. His tone clinical and controlled, though something flickered in his eyes that Alina could not quite identify. "You and I both attended that event." Alina found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "Mr. Blackwood, I am so sorry. That message was meant for my friend Jennifer. I must have accidentally selected your name instead. Please, just delete it and forget you saw anything." "Delete it?" Julian repeated, and for the first time his controlled facade cracked slightly. His jaw tensed, and he took 2 deliberate steps forward, closing the distance between them. "You want me to delete the evidence that you are carrying what is very possibly my child and simply forget about it?" The air in the office suddenly felt suffocating. Alina backed up until she hit the edge of her desk, gripping it for support. "Mr. Blackwood, I did not send that to manipulate you or trap you into anything," she said. forcing herself to meet his gaze, even though every instinct told her to look away. I was scared and needed to talk to someone. This was a mistake, a complete accident. I will handle this situation on my own. You do not need to be involved. Julian's eyes narrowed. Handle it on your own? Do you have any idea what that means? Do you have family support? Financial resources? A plan for prenatal care, child care, parental leave? Alina felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. I will figure it out. My mother lives upstate. I can move back if I need to. Move back to where exactly? Julian demanded, his voice sharp. A small town called Riverside. It is about 3 hours north of here, Alina admitted quietly. My mom works at the local diner. We could manage. Julian stared at her for a long moment, and Alina watched as various emotions flickered across his usually impassive face. Disbelief, anger, concern, and something else she could not quite name. Absolutely not, he finally said, the words coming out with absolute finality. You are not raising my child in some remote town on a waitress's salary, struggling to make ends meet. Lena's own anger flared suddenly, burning through her fear. With all due respect, Mr. Blackwood, you do not get to dictate what I do with my life, or my baby. I did not ask for your help, and I certainly did not ask for your opinion on how I should live. Your baby? Julian's voice dropped to a dangerously quiet level. If I am the father, and I strongly suspect that I am, then it is our baby, Miss Carter, and I take my responsibilities very seriously. The word responsibilities hit Alina like a slap. Of course, this was not about her, or even about genuine concern for a child. This was about Julian Blackwood's need to control every aspect of his life, including inconvenient situations like unexpected pregnancies. I am not a responsibility or a problem to be managed, Alina said, her voice shaking but determined. I will resign effective immediately. You will never hear from me again. She reached for her purse, but Julian's hand shot out, not touching her, but blocking her path. You are not resigning, he said firmly, and you are definitely not disappearing. We are going to handle this rationally and properly. There is nothing to handle, Alina insisted, trying to step around him, but he moved with her, maintaining the barrier. Listen to me very carefully, Julian said, and his voice had shifted into the commanding tone he used in boardrooms when he was about to make a non-negotiable deal. You sent me that ultrasound for a reason, even if it was accidental. Now I know about this pregnancy, and I will not pretend I do not. Tomorrow morning, you are taking a personal day. I am taking you to see Dr. Patricia Montgomery, the best obstetrician in Manhattan. We are going to confirm this pregnancy, establish paternity if necessary, and create a plan moving forward, Mr. Blackwood. Alina started, but he held up his hand. After the appointment, we are going to sit down somewhere private and have a real conversation about what happens next. Not here in this office where anyone could walk in, and not via text message. Like adults. Alina wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that he could not just commandeer her life like this. But the exhaustion of the day finally caught up with her. She had been awake since 5 in the morning, worked a full shift, gone to the ultrasound appointment during her lunch break, and now it was nearly 9 at night. Her body ached, her head throbbed, and she honestly did not know if she had the strength to fight Julian Blackwood tonight. Fine, she whispered. One appointment. One conversation. Then I make my own decisions. Julian studied her face for a moment, and his expression softened almost imperceptibly. When did you last eat? The question caught her completely off guard. I had a granola bar around 3. Pulled out his phone and made a quick call. Robert, bring the car around to the main entrance. We are leaving in 5 minutes. Ended the call and looked back at Alina. Get your things! I am taking you to dinner. Mr. Blackwood, I really just want to go home, Alina protested weakly. You live in a studio apartment in Queens, correct? Julian asked, and Alina blinked in surprise that he knew that. It is a 40-minute subway ride from here, and it is not safe at this hour. My driver will take you home after we eat something. There was no room for argument in his tone, and honestly, Alina was too tired to fight. She gathered her purse and jacket while Julian stood waiting patiently, his hands in his pockets. They rode the elevator down in absolute silence. Alina kept her eyes fixed on the descending floor numbers, acutely aware of Julian's presence beside her. The confined space made his expensive cologne more noticeable. A mixture of sandalwood and something crisp that reminded her of that night at the gala, when she had been foolish enough to believe a fairy tale could be real. Julian's driver, Robert, was waiting with a sleek black Mercedes. He opened the back door without comment, though Alina caught the brief flicker of surprise in his eyes when Julian indicated that she should enter first. The restaurant Julian chose was quiet and upscale, the kind of place where Alina would normally never dare to enter wearing her simple work clothes. But the host took one look at Julian and immediately led them to a private corner table, away from curious eyes. Alina ordered the first thing she saw on the menu, not really caring what it was. Julian ordered for himself, and then, surprisingly, asked the waiter to bring sparkling water and fresh bread immediately. When they were alone, Julian leaned back in his chair and studied her with those intense dark eyes. "Tell me about yourself, Alina Carter," he said quietly. "Not the employee file version?" "The real version." Alina looked up, startled by the use of her first name. "Why does it matter?" "Because 3 months ago we made a choice that resulted in a life being created," Julian said simply. "I think it matters quite a bit." The candlelight flickered across Julian's face as Alina tried to gather her thoughts. The bread arrived, warm and fragrant, and she realized just how hungry she actually was. She took a piece, buying herself time before answering his question. "There is not much to tell," Alina finally said, breaking the bread into smaller pieces. "I grew up in Riverside with my mom. My dad left when I was 8 and worked double shifts at the diner to put me through school. I got a scholarship to NYU, graduated 2 years ago, and have been working my way up ever since. That is the story." Julian listened without interrupting, his expression thoughtful. "And the father of the baby? Besides the biological aspect? Was there anyone else in the picture?" Alina shook her head firmly. "No, there has not been anyone serious in over a year. That night at the gala, it was completely unexpected. I never imagined something like that would happen, especially not with you." "Why, especially not with me?" Julian asked, a hint of something that might have been amusement touching his lips. Alina felt her cheeks warm. "Because you are Julian Blackwood. You are a billionaire CEO who dates supermodels and socialites. I am a junior coordinator who buys her work clothes at discount stores. We exist in completely different universes." The waiter arrived with their meals, giving Alina a reprieve from the intensity of Julian's gaze. They ate in relative silence for a few minutes before Julian spoke again. "My father was a factory worker in Pittsburgh," he said quietly, surprising Alina completely. "My mother cleaned houses. I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment with 4 siblings. Everything I have, I built from nothing. So, do not assume you know what universe I belong to, Alina." Alina set down her fork, seeing Julian Blackwood in an entirely different light. "I did not know that. Most people do not. I'd prefer it that way." Julian took a sip of his wine. "But I am telling you because I want you to understand something, what it is like to struggle. I know what it is like to watch your mother sacrifice everything for her children. And I will not allow history to repeat itself. If this child is mine, they will have every advantage, every opportunity, everything I did not have growing up." The fierce protectiveness in his voice made Alina's heart skip. This was not just about control or responsibility. There was something deeper here, something raw and genuine. "What about what I want?" Alina asked softly. "What if I want to raise my child with the same values my mother taught me? That love and character matter more than money." "Those things are not mutually exclusive," Julian countered. "You can teach love and character while also providing security and opportunity. Why should any child have to choose?" Alina could not argue with that logic, even though part of her still felt like she was being swept along by a current too strong to resist. They finished dinner, and true to his word, Julian had Robert drive Alina home. But before she got out of the car, Julian handed her a business card with a different number written on the back. "That is my personal cell phone," he said. "If you need anything, at any time, you call that number. Understood?" Alina nodded, tucking the card into her purse. She watched the Mercedes pull away, feeling like her entire world had been turned upside down in the span of a few hours. The next morning, Alina woke to a text message from an unknown number. Car will pick you up at 9, or something comfortable. Dr. Montgomery does not care about fashion. Despite her anxiety, Alina almost smiled. She chose a simple blue dress and cardigan, and at precisely 9 o'clock, Robert was waiting outside her building. Dr. Montgomery's office was in an exclusive medical building overlooking Central Park. The waiting room looked more like a luxury hotel lobby than a doctor's office. Alina felt completely out of place until Julian arrived 10 minutes after her, looking somehow even more commanding in a navy suit. "Miss Carter, Mr. Blackwood, please come in," a nurse called. And Alina's stomach flipped. Nervously, Dr. Montgomery was a woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She conducted a thorough examination, asked detailed questions, and performed another ultrasound. Alina watched the screen, seeing her baby's heartbeat again, and felt tears prick her eyes. "Everything looks perfectly healthy," Dr. Montgomery announced. "You are measuring right at 12 weeks and 5 days. The baby is developing normally. Heartbeat is strong. Do you have any questions?" Julian, who had been standing quietly by the wall, stepped forward. "When can we establish paternity?" Dr. Montgomery looked between them, understanding dawning in her expression. "We can do a non-invasive prenatal paternity test as early as 9 weeks. Since Miss Carter is already past that point, we can draw blood today and have results within a week." Alina nodded slowly. Part of her wanted to protest, to say it was unnecessary because she knew the truth. But another part understood that Julian needed concrete proof. Men like him did not operate on faith alone. The blood draw was quick. Soon they were back in Julian's car, heading toward his penthouse in Tribeca. "Thought we were just having a conversation," Alina said nervously as they pulled up to the gleaming glass tower. "We are," Julian replied. "But I prefer to have important conversations in private, and my office has too many interruptions." The penthouse was everything Alina expected and more. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered breathtaking views of the city. The decor was modern and minimalist, all clean lines and expensive materials. But somehow it felt cold and impersonal, like a showroom rather than a home. "Please sit," Julian said, gesturing to a large leather sofa. "Can I get you something? To drink? Water? Juice? Tea?" "Water is fine," Alina said, perching on the edge of the sofa. Julian returned with 2 glasses of sparkling water and sat across from her in a matching chair. "I have been thinking about our situation all night," he began, "and I have a proposal." Alina's stomach tightened. "What kind of proposal?" "Move in here," Julian said directly. "You take the guest suite, which is completely separate with its own bathroom and sitting area. No strings attached, no expectations beyond allowing me to ensure you and the baby are properly cared for. You continue working at Sterling if you want, or you can take leave. Whatever you are comfortable with." Alina stared at him in disbelief. "You want me to move into your penthouse?" "I want my child to have the best possible start in life," Julian corrected. "That means the best prenatal care, proper nutrition, a safe environment, and reduced stress for the mother. Can you honestly tell me your current situation provides all of that?" Alina wanted to argue, but she could not. Her studio apartment had thin walls, unreliable heat, and she could hear her neighbors fighting at all hours. She often skipped meals to save money for bills. The stress of trying to figure out how she would afford a baby on her salary kept her awake most nights. "This is insane," she whispered. "People will talk. They will assume things." "Let them assume," Julian said with a dismissive wave. "I stopped caring about gossip a long time ago. The only thing that matters is what is best for the baby." Before Alina could respond, the elevator chimed, and a woman's voice called out sharply, "Julian, we need to talk right now." Alina turned to see a stunning blonde woman in a designer dress, and heels striding into the penthouse as if she owned it. Her blue eyes were flashing with fury. "Victoria," Julian said, standing up with obvious displeasure. "I thought I made it clear we were finished." Victoria Ashford laughed bitterly. "You do not get to decide when we are finished, darling. My father is your largest investor. We're tied together whether you like it or not." Victoria's gaze finally landed on Alina, and her expression turned venomous. "Who is this? One of your little secretaries?" "This is Alina Carter," Julian said coldly, "and you need to leave now." But Victoria was already moving closer, her eyes narrowing as she took in Elena's appearance with cruel assessment. "Wait, I recognize you. You are from the marketing department. How utterly predictable, Julian. Could you not find someone from your own social class to amuse yourself with? Victoria, leave, Julian repeated, his voice dropping to a dangerous level. But Victoria was looking at Alina with sudden, sharp understanding. Oh my God, you are pregnant, are not you? I can see it in your face. That glow, the slightly fuller figure. She spun to face Julian. Tell me this is not what I think it is. Tell me you did not get your employee pregnant like some cliché from a soap opera? Julian moved between Victoria and Alina, his body language protective and unmistakably threatening. My personal life is no longer your concern. I suggest you leave before I have security escort you out. Victoria's face contorted with rage and hurt. You are throwing away everything we've built together for this. For her, my father will destroy you, Julian. He will pull every investment, tank your stock, and burn Sterling Media to the ground. Then let him try, Julian said simply. Now get out. Victoria looked between them one more time, her expression promising retribution, before she spun on her heel and stormed back to the elevator. The silence after her departure was deafening. Alina stood on shaky legs, feeling like she might be sick. I am sorry you had to witness that, Julian said quietly, turning back to her. Victoria and I ended our relationship months ago, but she has been unwilling to accept it. Her father is your largest investor, Alina asked, her voice barely steady. Julian, I cannot be the reason you lose everything you have built. You are not the reason for anything, Julian said firmly, crossing to her and taking her gently by the shoulders. Victoria's father has been looking for an excuse to squeeze me out and take control of Sterling for years. This situation with you simply accelerated his timeline. But he underestimates me. I have contingency plans he cannot even imagine. Alina looked up into Julian's dark eyes and saw absolute certainty there. Why are you doing this? Why are you willing to risk so much? Julian's hands tightened slightly on her shoulders, and for a moment, his carefully controlled expression cracked, revealing something raw underneath. Because for the first time in years, something in my life feels real. This baby, this situation, it is not a business deal or a calculated move. It just is. And I have spent so long building empires that I forgot what it feels like to build something that actually matters. Lena felt her breath catch. Before she could stop herself, she reached up and touched his face. Feeling the warmth of his skin beneath her palm, Julian closed his eyes briefly, leaning into her touch in a gesture that seemed almost vulnerable. When he opened them again, the intensity there made Elena's heart race. Stay, he said softly. Please, let me do this. Let me take care of you both. Elena knew she should say no. She knew accepting would complicate everything beyond measure. But standing there in that cold penthouse that suddenly felt warmer with Julian so close, she found herself nodding. Okay, she whispered. I will stay. The next 2 months passed in a blur of changes that left Elena's head spinning. She moved into Julian's penthouse. She insisted on keeping her studio apartment as a safety net, something that Julian argued against, but ultimately accepted. True to his word, he gave her complete privacy in the guest suite, never entering without permission. The medical care was unlike anything Elena had experienced. Dr. Montgomery monitored every aspect of the pregnancy with meticulous attention. Elena had vitamins, meal plans, and even a personal yoga instructor who specialized in prenatal fitness. Julian attended every single appointment, taking notes and asking detailed questions that revealed just how seriously he was taking his impending fatherhood at work. The gossip was inevitable, but managed. Julian made it clear, through carefully worded company communications, that Elena was under his personal protection, and that any harassment would result in immediate termination. Most of her colleagues were kind, though a few gave her looks that ranged from jealousy to pity. Victoria's threat materialized exactly 2 weeks after their confrontation. Harrison Ashford, her father, began a coordinated campaign to destabilize Sterling Media Group. He leveraged his position on the board to block key initiatives, spread rumors about Julian's mental state to other investors, and even attempted to poach Julian's top executives with lucrative offers. Elena watched. Julian handled each attack with calculated precision. He worked long hours, barely slept, but never once suggested that she was the problem, or that he regretted his choice to protect her. If anything, the external pressure seemed to strengthen his resolve. Her mother, Rose, visited after Alina finally worked up the courage to tell her everything. Rose Carter was a small woman with graying brown hair and hands weathered from decades of hard work. But she had a spine of pure steel. "This is the man," Rose said, looking Julian up and down in his own penthouse as if she were assessing livestock at a county fair. "Yes, ma'am," Julian replied, and Alina was surprised to see him actually look nervous. "I realize this situation is not ideal, but I want you to know that I intend to provide for both Alina and the baby. They will want for nothing." Rose continued to stare at him for a long, uncomfortable moment before she spoke. "My daughter does not need your money, Mr. Blackwood. She needs someone who will treat her with respect, will value her heart and mind, not just her ability to give you an heir. Can you be that man?" Julian met her gaze steadily. "I am trying to be, Mrs. Carter. I am not perfect, and I have made many mistakes in my life. But I give you my word that Elena's happiness matters to me. She is not a transaction or an obligation. She is important." Rose studied him a moment longer, then nodded slowly. "Good, because if you hurt my daughter, Mr. Blackwood, I do not care how many billions you have. I will come for you with everything I have got." Despite the tension, Julian smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his usually severe features. "I would expect nothing less, ma'am." Rose turned to Alina and pulled her into a tight hug. "He is rough around the edges, baby girl, but I see something real in his eyes when he looks at you. Just be careful. Rich men have complicated lives." The complications Rose warned about reached a crisis point on a Tuesday evening in late autumn. Alina was 5 months pregnant now, her belly unmistakably round beneath her clothes. She had finally started to relax into this new life, to believe that maybe everything would actually work out. She came home early from a doctor's appointment to find Julian's office door ajar. Voices drifted out, tense and urgent. She knew she should announce herself, should go to her room and give him privacy. But something in the tone made her pause. "I am telling you, Julian, this is the only way." It was a man's voice, unfamiliar to her. "The Ashford situation has escalated beyond business rivalry. Harrison is preparing to file a motion with the board to have you removed as CEO based on grounds of compromised judgment and fiduciary irresponsibility. His legal team has built a case around your relationship with Miss Carter. Let them try." Julian's voice was ice. "I control enough shares to block any removal vote." "Not anymore," the man replied grimly. "He has been quietly buying up shares through shell companies for months. As of yesterday, he has enough votes to force you out if he can prove instability. And he is planning to use Miss Carter and the baby as Exhibit A." There was a long pause. Elena's heart pounded so hard she thought it might break through her chest. "What are you suggesting, Richard?" Julian finally asked, his tone carefully neutral. "Establish legal separation now," Richard said. "I have drawn up custody documents that give you primary guardianship. Based on your superior financial resources and stable home environment, Miss Carter gets a generous financial settlement, a trust fund for the child, and visitation rights. It is clean, it is legal, and it completely undermines Ashford's narrative that you are acting irrationally due to romantic entanglement." Alina pressed her hand over her mouth to stifle her gasp. They were discussing taking her baby, reducing her to scheduled visitation like she was some kind of unstable element that needed to be managed and contained. "The documents are ready for signature," Richard continued. "I took the liberty of having them prepared. All you need to do is present them to Miss Carter. Given her financial situation, she will likely be relieved to have such a generous offer. Most women in her position would jump at this kind of security." Alina did not wait to hear Julian's response. She turned and walked as quickly as her pregnant body would allow back to her suite. Her hands shook as she pulled out her old suitcase from the closet and began throwing clothes into it haphazardly. Tears streamed down her face, but she did not make a sound. She'd been so stupid, so incredibly naive. Julian had never wanted a family. He wanted an heir and a neat solution that would not damage his precious company. All the doctor's appointments, the gentle touches, the way he looked at her. It was all just him playing a role, protecting his investment. Alina grabbed her purse and the few personal items she had brought to the penthouse. She left behind every gift Julian had given her, every piece of expensive clothing, every luxury item. She wanted nothing from him except her freedom. She took the service elevator down to avoid security, her heart breaking with every floor she descended. By the time she reached the street, it was dark and starting to rain. She hailed a cab with shaking hands. Port Authority bus terminal, she told the driver, her voice barely audible. She would go home to Riverside. Her mother would take her in. They would figure it out together, just like they always had. Her baby would grow up with less money, but more love. That had to be enough. The bus terminal was crowded and chaotic, a stark contrast to the quiet luxury of Julian's penthouse. Alina bought a ticket for the next bus to Riverside, with the last of her savings. She had 45 minutes until departure. She sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair in the waiting area. One hand on her belly, feeling her baby move beneath her palm. "It is going to be okay," she whispered. "We do not need him. We have each other, and we have Grandma Rose. That is all we need." But even as she said the words, her heart ached with a pain so profound it felt physical. She had been falling in love with Julian Blackwood, despite every warning her rational mind had given her. She had started to believe in the fairy tale. The idea that the billionaire and the small-town girl could actually build something real together. Alina. The shout came from across the terminal, raw and desperate. Elena's head snapped up, and her breath caught in her throat. Julian was running toward her through the crowd. His suit jacket gone, his white shirt untucked, and his hair disheveled. He looked nothing like the controlled, powerful CEO she knew. He looked wild, panicked, completely undone. People scattered out of his way as he raced across the terminal floor. He nearly collided with a family pulling luggage, but barely seemed to notice. His eyes were locked on Alina with an intensity that froze her in place. He reached her and dropped to his knees, right there in front of her chair. Breathing hard, his hands coming up to grip her arms gently. "Oh, do not get on that bus," Julian gasped out, his chest heaving. "Please, Alina, do not leave. You want to take my baby?" Alina said, tears streaming down her face. "I heard you and your lawyer. You have documents ready to take custody, to reduce me to weekend visitation. You were just waiting for the right moment to present your neat little solution." Julian's face crumpled with anguish. "No, God, no." "You did not hear the whole conversation." "I heard enough," Alina said, trying to pull away. But Julian held her gently but firmly. "Richard presented those documents, and do you know what I told him?" Julian's voice was rough, raw with emotion. "I told him to burn them. I told him if he ever suggested separating you from our baby again, he was fired. I told him I would rather lose every penny I have ever made than lose you." Alina stopped, struggling, staring at him in shock. "What?" Julian released her arms and instead took her face in both his hands, forcing her to look directly into his eyes. "You are not an obligation or a problem to be solved. You are everything. These past 2 months with you in my home, in my life, they have been the happiest I have ever been. Not because of the baby, because of you. The way you argue with me when you think I am being unreasonable. The way you sing off-key in the shower. The way you reorganized my kitchen because my system made no sense. You made that cold apartment feel like a home for the first time ever. But the company," Alina whispered, "your empire. Harrison Ashford will destroy everything." "Then let him try," Julian said fiercely. "I built Sterling Media once from nothing. I can do it again if I have to. But I cannot build another you, Alina. I cannot replace what we have, and I am not willing to try." Stood up, pulling her gently to her feet with him, and then did something that made everyone in the surrounding area stop and stare. Julian Blackwood, billionaire CEO, got down on one knee in the middle of the Port Authority bus terminal. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a stunning but surprisingly simple diamond ring. "I bought this 3 weeks ago," he admitted. I have been carrying it around, trying to find the perfect moment, the perfect words. But there are no perfect moments or perfect words. There is just the truth. His voice carried across the now silent section of the terminal. The truth is that I am completely in love with you, Alina Carter. Not because you are carrying my child, but because you are brave and strong and kind. Because you call me out when I am being an arrogant idiot. Because you made me remember that there are things more important than quarterly earnings and market share. You made me want to be a better man. Alina could barely see him through her tears. Her whole body was shaking. Marry me, Julian said, his own eyes glistening. Not for the baby, not for the company, not to solve any problem. Marry me because when I imagine my future, every single happy moment has you in it. Marry me because I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. Marry me because I am desperately, hopelessly in love with you. The entire terminal seemed to be holding its breath. Alina looked down at Julian, this powerful man kneeling before her, his heart completely exposed, and she saw the truth in his eyes. This was not a business deal. This was real, she whispered then louder. Yes. Julian surged to his feet and kissed her, pouring everything he felt into that kiss. Around them, the terminal erupted in applause and cheers. Someone whistled. Someone else yelled encouragement. When they finally broke apart, Julian slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. How did you know my size? Alina asked, laughing through her tears. I am very good at gathering information, Julian said with a small smile. It is one of my few talents. You have other talents too, Alina said, reaching up to straighten his rumpled collar. You are going to be an amazing father. Julian rested his forehead against hers. We should probably go home now. We have a lot to figure out, like how to deal with Harrison Ashford trying to destroy your company, Alina asked. Our company, Julian corrected. And yes, we will figure it out. Together. That is how this works now. We face everything together. They walked out of the terminal hand in hand, leaving behind the bus that would have taken Alina back to her old life. She was choosing a new life now. A life that would not be easy or simple, but would be filled with love. The battle with Harrison Ashford was fierce and lasted another 4 months. Julian refused to hide his relationship with Alina, instead making it very public. He proposed officially at a board meeting that Harrison had called to oust him. Placing the ring on Alina's finger in front of all the investors and declaring that his personal life gave him strength, not weakness. In the end, Harrison overplayed his hand. His attempts to manipulate the market and damage Sterling's reputation backfired spectacularly. When an investigative journalist uncovered the shell companies and illegal trading practices he had been using, Harrison and Victoria both faced securities fraud charges. His entire empire began to crumble. Julian, meanwhile, emerged stronger than ever. Investors who had been on the fence rallied behind him, pressed by his integrity and his willingness to fight for what mattered. Sterling Media Group's stock reached record highs. But none of that compared to the morning Alina went into labor. They were at Julian's penthouse, which had been transformed over the past months into something warm and welcoming. There were photos on the walls now, books scattered on surfaces, Elena's paintings hanging in the hallways. It looked like a home. Elena's water broke at 3 in the morning. Julian, who had been sleeping lightly for weeks in anticipation, was awake instantly. He helped her dress, gathered the hospital bag they had packed weeks ago, and held her hand through every contraction during the drive to the hospital. Dr. Montgomery was waiting for them. Calm and professional, as always. The labor was long and difficult. Alina labored for 14 hours, and Julian never left her side. He held her hand, fed her ice chips, encouraged her through every push, his own face pale with vicarious pain. At 5:47 p.m., on a sunny April evening, Alexander James Blackwood entered the world with a lusty cry that echoed through the delivery. Julian cut the umbilical cord with shaking hands, tears streaming openly down his face. When the nurse placed the baby in Elena's arms, he sat on the edge of the bed and wrapped his arms around both of them. His family, complete at last. He is perfect, Julian whispered. His voice choked with emotion. You are perfect. God, Alina, I love you so much. Alina looked up at him, exhausted and radiant. I love you too. We did it. We did it, Julian agreed, pressing a kiss to her sweaty forehead. Then leaning down to place the gentlest of kisses on Alexander's tiny head, Rose arrived an hour later and burst into tears the moment she saw her grandson. She had made peace with Julian over the past months, coming to appreciate his devotion to her daughter, even if his wealth still made her somewhat uncomfortable. 3 days later, they brought Alexander home to the penthouse. Julian had personally overseen every detail of the nursery, from the custom crib to the stars painted on the ceiling that glowed softly at night. 2 weeks after that, on a quiet Saturday morning with just Rose and the hospital chaplain as witnesses, Julian and Alina were married in the penthouse living room. Alina wore a simple, ivory dress that accommodated her post-pregnancy body. Julian wore a suit but no tie, finally relaxed and at ease. When the chaplain pronounced them husband and wife, Julian kissed her with such tenderness and love that Rose had to dab at her eyes with a tissue. I told you rich men have complicated lives, Rose whispered to Alina later as they watched Julian awkwardly but determinedly change Alexander's diaper, talking to his son in a soft, gentle voice. Yes, Alina agreed, smiling as she watched her husband and son together. But some complications are worth it. Julian looked up and caught her watching. The smile he gave her was private, intimate, full of promise. He had spent his whole life building an empire of glass and steel. But his real legacy was right here in this room. A wrong number had changed everything. A simple mistake had led to the greatest joy either of them had ever known. And as Alexander gurgled happily in his father's arms, Alina knew with absolute certainty that every moment of fear, doubt, and struggle had been worth it to arrive at this perfect, imperfect, beautiful life they had built together. Their fairy tale had not started in a ballroom or ended with a grand gesture. It had started with a mistake and ended with a choice to love each other every single day. Through chaos and complications, through boardroom battles and midnight feedings, it was messy and real and absolutely perfect, and they lived. Not happily ever after in some distant future, but happily right now, in the midst of their wonderfully complicated life, together. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to click like. Share this story with your friends and family, and subscribe to that channel so you don't miss out on more meaningful stories.